Hi everyone, it's been 2 weeks since I've done a Wednesday live, so I'm very excited to come back to you. I've been planning to do a live about Dai Kan or big cold as according to Ashiwara Kengyo. I'm utilizing this book, so I'll tell you a bit more about it in a minute. So if you're interested in learning more about big cold, or again, it's called Dai Kan in Japanese, then you're going to want to stick with me because this is what we're going to get into. We're going to talk about the techniques used for Dai Kan, the theory behind it, and the protocol that you want to use it. And it's a really, really commonly seen protocol, especially in like patients who have Raynaud syndrome. So excited to get into this. Before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe. I really do appreciate it. It helps the algorithm get my videos out to more acupuncturists just like yourself in the YouTube community who are learning to up their skills. So I really would appreciate it if you'd like to subscribe and hit the little bell. All right, so let's get into it. So I'm taking this all from Shin Do Happi Kogi, which essentially is the Tao lectures on the Tao of acupuncture. It's written by Yokota Kampu Sensei, who is, by the way, the head of the Yashinamichi Chess study. It's a very near and dear book to me because it has been extremely helpful in my practice. Unfortunately, it is only in Japanese, so I do apologize. If you're looking for an English copy, there is not one until I translate it or till someone else in this lovely community does. So if you're interested in jumping on that board, you just let me know. So let's get into it. This is chapter 5, Dai Kan. So I'm just going to say it first once in Japanese. And so for those of the few of my users that are Japanese, you can learn a little bit about it in your own language. So これをその針を深くして久しくとどめるべし。肩、背中のこわばるところを多く刺して、その気を巡らして、あと手足を遠慮心にして強い刺すべし。touch ところに頭るなり。So what that means, for those of you who don't speak Japanese, and again, my Japanese, when I read it, sounds horrible, so apologize for that. This is really about the patient who's super cold in their body. So I like to equivocate it to Raynaud syndrome because it's super easy to get that visual. So if you can just imagine this patient who's always cold, always has cold hands and feet, they just always feel freezing cold. And so the protocol for this is that you're going to take your needle and you're going to insert it deeply and leave it there. So it doesn't really tell you where to leave it, and we'll get into why that in just a second. And then it says, so sono hari o fukaku shite hisashiku totomeru beshi. Yeah, so insert your needle deeply and leave it. And then you're going to needle many places on the shoulders and the mid upper back, I would say, that are really, really tight. So what you're doing is you're looking for little bands of muscle. And I really wish I had a whiteboard on these things, but I'll have to do my best to draw it out and show it to you on a little piece of paper. So when you have your patients back, oftentimes with this kind of client, I know it's super tiny, right? Oftentimes with this client, what you're going to see are little bands, and they're going to have tons of these little strong bands of tight muscles in their neck, especially upper neck, shoulders, in between the shoulder blades, all of these little paces. Now, you might see bands that go all the way down from along the bladder channel or the line 1 or second line of the bladder channel. And you might find ones that are just kind of out of nowhere, and they're just these little bands of really spindly muscles. So what you're going to want to do is so the technique really is hinted on in the language. So whenever they say to insert a needle deeply and leave that needle for a long period of time, they're essentially saying you need to tonify. Now, whenever they say that you want to insert quickly and many needles, they're saying you need to disperse with that technique. And that is because the definition classically of a tonifying needle is deep, slow, and few. And of a dispersing technique is shallow, many, and I'm missing one. Shallow, many, and quick. There we go. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a very dispersive technique. You can think of this as your contact needling technique, where we're just going on the surface of the skin. Or you might think of it where we insert, tap, and you don't even tap it all the way down to the guide tube. And there's a technique where you can lift that needle back up with your guide tube, move the guide tube over, place it, allow the needle to drop, tap in once or twice, lift up that needle again. So it's not even inserting it to the guide tube hilt. And you can do that in several different places. And or you can also target the actual bands of tight muscles, which is a little bit more difficult because they tend to be quite slippery. So you're going to insert, wait until you really go to that band. You never go through the band, but go to the top of the band, allow it to relax, and then quickly take it out. Okay, so after that, it's saying you should be able to utilize and move the ki with that needle while you're doing that. So you really want to have this hibiki. So if those of you are unfamiliar with hibiki, it literally means an echo of energy. It means that the energy is moving, the ki is moving within the body, and that's really important for all the points that you place. But in particular, he's saying you need to be moving the ki here, so the ki really does need to move. You do need to disperse these points. And it says, Ato, te ashi o en nishi ni shite tsuyoku sasu. So when it's saying specifically, after that, you're going to go to the hands and the feet, and you're going to use an en-nishin. Now, an en-nishin is literally classically what we would now use in our clinics. It is your sarin needle, stereotypical needle. Now, classically though, when anyone ever said en-nishin, that meant tonifying needle. It was a very gentle, soft, thinner needle for the time. And so whenever en-nishin is ever mentioned, which is just, again, a type of classical needle, they're automatically telling you that that's the classical needle technique, that it's going to be a tonifying. Now, it's saying to strongly needle with a tonifying en-nishin in the hands and feet. And so what that means is we're trying to pull the ki down into the hands and feet and help it to warm up the hands and feet, which is, again, why I think Raynaud's syndrome is such a beautiful display of big cold. It doesn't have to be Raynaud's, but, in Raynaud's, they're so cold and they have a lot of cold in their stomach, and they have these spindly muscles in their upper back, mid upper back, and then their hands and feet are freezing. They don't have any ki moving in there. And so that's why we're doing all of these things. So we're putting a deep needle. Usually that deep needle is in the stomach. And then we're quickly dispersing the shoulders and upper back, and then pulling the ki down strongly with a tonifying technique into the hands and feet. So there's a lot more that this chapter really goes into. But the actual passage, unfortunately, that Ashiwara Kengyo wrote, and those of you who don't know, Ashiwara Kengyo is a very famous herbalist and acupuncturist. He is a kind of amazing dude. So if you're interested, I highly suggest looking him up a little bit more. He was quite famous for his time. But to not get too much into the history, for this specific text, called again Shin Do Happi Kogi, or the Tao of acupuncture. This is the lectures on the Tao of acupuncture, because Yokota Kampo Sensei put in commentary. For this particular text, he's not very forthcoming with his information. So he writes something extremely simple. There's a few lines and period, it's all done, and he's out of there. There's no additional explanation. So at the time when he wrote this book, it wasn't really recognized as the monumental text it really, really is. However, once it was rediscovered by Yokota Kampo Sensei quite recently, and then commented on, a lot of different groups within Japan are now utilizing this text to supplement their own text. I've heard from the leader of Sesshinkai over in Japan, who says that he absolutely loves this text, and a few other people too. Not to say that it's like super widespread, but many people utilize it. Within this book, some of the very first chapters are talking about what to do for stroke, for paralytic symptoms. And then also there's these two chapters right in the beginning called Big Heat, Tainetsu, and Big Cold, Dai Kan. So really, really important chapters. In my next live, I'm going to go into that Tainetsu, or again, Big Heat, and talk about this really fundamental difference between what big cold is and what big heat is. I have talked about this a little bit in some of my social media, but this is the first time really here on YouTube that I'm talking about it. And I more than likely am going to come back and really start referencing it. Now, if you're interested in going into this more with me, this book and so much more is what I really get into in ShinKyu University. Currently, we're studying the Shanghanlun. The next book that we're going to study, you guessed it, it's going to be this sucker. So I'm really excited to go into this material with everybody. Please do let me know in the comments if you're interested in coming into ShinKyu University and learning this material with me one-on-one and in a group setting. We do both online and in-person learning, so it's very attuned to the current day and gives you that opportunity. And we will also be going, by the way, to Japan next November, hopefully. So let me know also if you're interested in that trip. Okay, so that's all for today. Again, on Shin Do Happi Kogi, the lectures on the Tao of acupuncture, on the chapter 5 entitled Big Cold. This book is released by Nihon no Igakusha, so the Japanese medical company, I guess you could call it in English. I'm not sure what their English name is, but it was written by Yukota Kampu sensei. The commentary, of course, the main text was originally by Ashiwara Kengyo. So that's all for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you have any comments, please do leave them below.